Chess YouTube, Magnus Carlsen is the undisputed king of new openings. Nobody invents new opening trash, and even good new openings like the GOAT Magnus. But in this game, the tables have been turned. His opponent, the Ukrainian federal master Artem, he invents a new opening that is so shocking, so aggressive, Magnus was simply left speechless in this game. Artem busts out not just one pawn attack, not just two, not just three, not just four, but 5 pawn attacks on the king side. I'm calling this the Anti-Norwegian Five Pawn Attack, and yes, this position right here has never ever been played in the history of the game, making it a brand new opening. Let's dive right in. Alright, in the game, Artem opening 1 e4 and Magnus here d6. Then we have d4, pawn number 2. Black here g6, Magnus going for sort of a modern defense. The idea is you fianchetto the bishop, and from there you play very, very flexible, doing whatever it is that you want. From here, Artem, knight c3 is the move. Black, bishop g7, and now bishop e3. Artem going for the most aggressive setup possible versus the modern defense, and the idea is simple. From here, you may want to go, for example, queen d2, long castles, bishop h6, trade off the bishop, and this is called the 150 attack, and it is by far the strongest and most aggressive overall setup versus the modern. Now here, as black, what is black doing? Magnus here getting a very flexible setup, and again, he has many ideas. You can go, for example, knight to f6, the pure defense, or c6, or a6, or many other ideas, but in the game, Magnus here goes for, it's called the Tiger's Modern. It is by far the most trendy way to play the modern defense, and black does play the move here, a6, intending a fast b5, which does 2 things. First of all, actually 3 things. First of all, you gain space on the queen side. Second of all, the bishop on c8 goes to b7, a very good square, the double fianchetto. And finally, you are threatening b4 in certain lines, putting pressure on the knight, and therefore also the pawn on e4 with the bishop. So it's a very trendy way to play as black. Now, here, Artem has many ideas. You can go, for example, knight f3, or queen d2, or even the alpha 0 attack, h4 right away, intending h5. But instead, he plays also a very trendy idea. That is the move g4. Pawn number 3 is on the board. Now, with this move, White's idea is simple. He wants to go bishop g2, countering the black fianchetto, and then also h4 and h5, and the g-pawn controls h5, which dissuades black from ever going h5, as that would open up the g-file. It's a very trendy, very complicated, but very strong idea from White that many grandmasters are playing these days, including, for example, Fabiano Caruana, and so on. Alright, Magnus here, unfazed, goes b5, gaining space on the queen side. And by the way, the timers are now live. I am the worst with timers. Feel free to roast me in the comments below, but the timers are there right now down below. Anyways, from here, Artem sticking to his guns. He plays the move here, h4, pawn number 4 on the board. The idea again is simple. White trying to go h5 at some point, getting the attack going on the king side, alpha 0 style. Black, bishop b7, targeting e4. Now, very importantly, black here is threatening b4, and once the knight moves, taking on e4 the bishop, targeting the rook, that would be a total disaster. For example, if h5, b4, knight e2, bishop takes, and black here is just completely dominating. Now, instead of that, in the game, bishop g2 was chosen. That is one of the ideas behind g4. The bishop does go to g2, defends e4. That way, if b4, knight e2, the pawn on e4 does not hang. It's the entire idea behind the opening. Now, Magnus here plays a very prudent idea, very sagacious move. The move is h6. The idea being, it's very simple. If White does go h5 here, then black can go g5. The pawn is defended on g5, and from there, White has absolutely no attack, and black is doing fantastic. So h5 here, not a good idea at all for White. So what else can White do? Well, Artem here plays actually a brand new move, making it actually a brand new concept, maybe even a brand new opening. That is the move here, f4, with the quintuple pawn attack on the king side. Again, the Anti-Norwegian Five Pawns Attack. You may have heard of the 4 pawns attack in the Alekhines opening, the King's Indian defense, but how about the 5 pawn attack? Here we go. In this position, White is threatening not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 different pawn advances, and it turns out they're actually all quite decent. Magnus here has his hands full guarding against all these threats. So what does he do right here? Well, he counterattacks with the move b4, e4, pushing back that knight from c3. From here, that knight has many possible squares. You can go to a4, d5, a4, d5, e2, b1, and it turns out they're all sort of playable. I mean, every move here is actually decent for white. In the game, though, knight c to e2 was chosen, a good move and perhaps the strongest move in the position. Black here, knight to f6. Sooner or later, that knight must be developed. You can't just leave your king on e8 forever. I mean, the king side is just too undeveloped. So now knight f6, intending potentially short castling in the very near future. From here, white, knight to g3, defending e4 with that knight, a very solid idea, and very funnily enough, the knight from c3 transferring all the way over to the king side from where it supports ideas like f5, h5, g5, and so on. So not a bad idea by the Ukrainian federal master. From here, black, h5, gaining space on the king side, a very double-edged and aggressive idea, and maybe not the strongest. Instead, the computer here loves the idea of simply knight bd7, developing and controlling squares like c5 and e5. Instead, h5 played in the game by Magnus, the idea being he's trying to gain control of the g4 square. From here, white takes on h5. We have g takes, knight takes, then knight takes, and rook takes. So the entire game here has completely transformed. White's pawn on h4 is now blockaded by the rook. On the other hand, white does have 3 very mobile pawns left in the center in this Anti-Norwegian Five Pawns Attack new opening. All right, from here, what is Artem going to do? Well, he finds the strongest idea. This guy is simply on fire in this game. He plays the move here, f5. Now, what is the idea? This move has a very insidious threat behind it. If you take the pawn or go g5, but a boom, but a bang, the rook on the h5 square falls. That is the idea. It is the deflection pawn sack. If g takes, boom, queen takes, wins the rook, and white wins the game on the spot. Of course, Magnus being the GOAT, you don't become the GOAT by sacking the rook willy-nilly. Therefore here, he does defend with the move here, knight to d7. And this move is a very clever defensive idea. Let's see what happens. White here takes on g6, black takes back, and now we have queen to g4, targeting the weak pawn on g6. And how is black gonna defend that pawn? You can't defend with, say, the rook. You lose the rook on the spot to the bishop of the pawn. But instead, black here plays the move, a very typical Magnus move, if we're being honest. Knight to f8. Wow, the knight guards the g6 square like this. I mean, this guy Magnus, he always finds a way to bring his pieces back to the back rank, defend pawns like this, and somehow make it work. And that was the idea, of course, behind knight d7 right here. Magnus, he saw into the future and knew that knight needed access to f8 to defend on g6 like this. All right, from here, Artem, knight to e2. Developing, and funnily enough, white still has the option of castling king side or queen side depending on where he wants to go in this game. Black, we have queen d7 offering the queen trade. Here Artem, he declines queen g3, and here Magnus, he finds a way to bring his king shockingly over to the queen side, and both sides do castle queen side. We have castles and castles. And Magnus, his king on the queen side, I mean, yes, it is safer than in the center, but on the other hand, I mean, his pawns on a6 and b4 are very vulnerable, and white is going to have decent attacking chances on the queen side as well, despite attacking on the king side earlier in the game. All right, from Magnus here, king b8 is the move, sliding over with the king, a solid idea, and white e5, gaining space in the center. From here, black, he takes on g2. We have bishop takes g2, queen takes g2, and then queen to c8, sliding back with the queen. From here, knight to f4, white jumps up, hits the rook on h5, and the rook must move, or at least that's what I thought when I first saw the idea. Instead, Magnus here finds a shocking but very strong intermediate idea, the intermezzo, bishop to h6, the idea being the knight is now pinned to the bishop. If you take the rook, you lose the bishop with check on the king, and then you lose the knight. For example, knight takes, bishop takes, the king moves, and then g takes, and somehow black comes out ahead, winning the 2 minor pieces versus the rook. Therefore, Artem, being a very strong federal master from Ukraine, he does not take the bait. Instead, king b1, he slides over with the king, renewing the threat on the rook. If he takes here, black takes back, the bishop does not take with check, and therefore white wins the exchange. So Magnus here, he trades on f4. We have bishop takes, and then rook to f5, sliding over, defending the rook and attacking the bishop on the f4 square. From here, bishop g5, hits the pawn on e7. Black takes on e5. We have d takes, and then rook takes e5. Black winning a pawn, but that is a small consolation for the very vulnerable black king on the b8 square. So from here, the battle lines in this game have been drawn. Black is up the single pawn. On the other hand, his king is super vulnerable, and the knight on the f8 square is one of the worst knights I've ever seen in my entire life. So black here is going to have one heck of a time trying to find a way to bring his king to safety, defend his queen side here, and also bring out the rest of his pieces, the knight, the queen, and so on. From here, Artem plays a very interesting idea. Queen to c6, flying up with the queen and pressuring all kinds of squares here on the queen side. Black, rook d6, hits the queen. White, queen c4, slides back and maintains pressure on a6 and attacks the pawn on b4. A very strong multi-purpose idea with that white queen. Black here plays the move rook to b5, sliding over with the rook, which does defend b4 and blocks the attack on the pawn on a6, which looks very logical, but it turns out this move here was not the best by far. Instead, Stockfish here says you must bring out this knight from e6 with the move knight to e6, even if you give up a pawn in the process on b4. It is that important to bring out that knight off the back rank. Instead, black here, rook to b5 played in the game. From here, white takes on e7. We have bishop takes e7, and black takes on d1. Rook takes d1, rook takes d1, and then we have here the move from black, knight to e6. Now, I just said this move here is so important. You must bring the knight back from the back rank into the game. But it turns out this is not the time to do it. This is very important. In this position, right here, Magnus had to find the move queen to e6, offering the queen trade, and from there say knight d7 and so on. Instead, knight e6 played in the game, and this a massive strategic mistake. As you can see, the eval bar skyrocketing for the Ukrainian federal master, Artem Diachuk. All right, here, b3 for white. Black, rook b6, sliding back with the rook, and now white, bishop takes b4. Winning the free pawn on b4, and now white has the attack on the king, the better pawn structure. He has 1-2 pawn islands versus the 1-2-3 of black, and the extra pawn. So white here having a commanding lead in this game, in this new opening, the Anti-Norwegian Five Pawns Attack. All right, black, queen to e8, sliding over with that queen and over defending the knight on e6. Therefore, the rook on b6 is now able to move off this file. From here, bishop a5, putting pressure on that rook, and then we have rook to c6, putting pressure on the white queen. The queen gets out of the way of the attack, queen to e4, it slides over, and then we have king to b7, defending the rook in advance, but in doing so, pinning the rook on c6 to the king on the b7 square. From here, rook d4, developing, and of course the knight on e6 is pinned to the queen, therefore the rook cannot be taken, and from here rook b4 is one very serious threat. From here, knight g7, offering the queen trade, rook b4 hits the king, king to c8, and then queen d4. Artem Diachuk, he knows Magnus is the best endgame player of all time, therefore he keeps the queens on the board for now, and threatens ideas like, for example, queen to a7, queen a8 check, and so on. From here, black, knight f5, hits the queen, and white, queen d2, sliding back, maintaining the tension. From here, queen d5, Magnus slowly but surely centralizing in this game, finding a good square overall for the queen, hitting the bishop, and so on. Now here, Artem Diachuk plays the move rook to g4, which to me looks so logical, but it turns out this move here is not the best. Instead, rook to f4 was the better idea, maintaining pressure on that knight on f5. Instead, rook g4 played in the game, Magnus rook d6, attacking the queen on d2, and then Artem Diachuk queen c3, finding a very good time to offer the trade of queens, and Magnus here, he does go for it, being the greatest endgame player of all time. He swoops in, queen takes c3, bishop takes, and here, Artem, he has many advantages in this endgame. He has the better pawn structure, he's up one pawn, even has the better minor piece, the bishop versus knight with pawns on both sides of the board. However, Magnus being the greatest endgame player, let's see what happens. And keep in mind, both sides under extreme time pressure. 34 seconds left per side with no increment. That means 34 seconds per side to make every single move, no exceptions. All right, black here, knight e3, jumping in with that knight. We have rook to g5, getting out of the way of the attack of the knight. Now rook d1 hits the king, and black suddenly has some very dangerous ideas against the white king on b1. The king goes to b2. We have rook h1 targeting h4. Rook takes g6, and now black here does not trade on h4. Oh no, he plays the move knight to d1, check, hitting the king. Look at this. If you move the king anywhere, you lose the bishop. But what choice does white have? Magnus finding a way to win an entire minor piece versus Artem. King to a3, knight takes c3, and then rook takes a5. White here winning 3 pawns versus the minor piece. Of course, h4 is going to fall sooner or later. And in the meantime, Magnus has the extra knight, and he still has a pawn, which means he actually has good winning chance in this new opening, the Anti-Norwegian Five Pawns Attack. All right, black, king b7, hits the rook. The rook slides over, rook to h6, and then we have rook to h2, targeting the pawn on the c2 square. From here, king b2 defends, knight d1 hits the king, and here in this position, white has to find the exact precise move. If you go to, say, a2, you lose the pawn, therefore c1 and b1 are the most logical squares, but which square do you want to go to? In the game, Artem chose the square king c1, which makes a lot of sense. The idea being, if you go to b1 like this, then knight c3 check hits the king and is very annoying. But it turns out this was the right move for shocking reasons. I'll explain why in just a moment. Instead, king c1 chosen in the game, and this is a fatal mistake. Black, knight to e3, the knight drops back, and this is the problem with having the king on c1. From here, rook takes c2 comes with check on the king, and if the king was still on b1, that would not hit with check, and black would be doing not as well as he is in the game. From here, white, he's got to find the move here. Rook to e6, that is the only saving move. Instead, c3 chosen. Black here takes on a2, and Magnus has a completely dominant endgame. And here, Artem, he simply loses on time. But on the other hand, he also had a far worse position. Either way, Magnus would clean up in this game with the extra minor piece. Wow, what a game between Artem Diachuk, the Ukrainian federal master, and Magnus Carlsen, the Norwegian player and the greatest player of all time, in this crazy, crazy new opening where Artem literally launched 5 pawns immediately by move 8, the Anti-Norwegian Five Pawns Attack. Alright guys, hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, please smash that like button, comment down below. Whatever you want to say is all good. And by the way, right now we're having our Black Friday sale, 20% off lifetime access to our new coaching program, DR Mike Chess Pro. And in this program, we literally guarantee you will gain 200 plus ELO in 90 days or less, guaranteed, or your money back. We are the only program in the world offering that guarantee, and we can back it up. Trust me on that. So if you want to gain 200 plus ELO in 90 days, 100% guaranteed, and get a lifetime discount of 20% to the program, join right now. And if you're watching this after the Black Friday sale, still join. It's still an amazing program, and we do guarantee insane results or your money back. So links down below in the pinned comment and the description. Also, drmikechess.com also sends you straight to DR Mike Chess Pro, so head right there as well, and I'll see you in the next video.